What is going on, my people? Tonight we are making fermented hot sauce. And by we, I mean not me, because I don't know how to. That's why we're doing this, because basically I get to use this platform to make people teach me things that I want to know how to do. So today we are joined by our good friend, the Comrade Chef. If you guys remember, we did a kimchi episode and he taught us how to use all of the leftovers of our broccoli and all the other things that we eat that otherwise would get tossed and make it into something delicious, which I have since had because of his work, and it was delicious. So thank you for introducing me to a new food. So hopefully, who's out there? We got a few folks. If you guys want, drop a question, thought, comment, concern, anything like that around hot sauce, because it's going to get hot in here. So let's do it. Comrade Chef, welcome back.
Hey, good to be back. Good to be here. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Just getting you
Great.
front and center.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Always important.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about hot sauce. Like what?
So,
Just go ahead.
yeah. Hot sauce is, obviously a condiment that I think I eat with almost every meal that I can, wherever it's reasonable. Really great punch of flavor to just about anything that you cook. It's used, different hot sauces are made around the world. They're all, different recipes are used, but one of the common themes that goes into that is fermentation that goes along with hot sauces. Some of the best hot sauces, usually the ones that you think of as your favorite hot sauce, probably were fermented, to some degree, because that adds a whole depth of flavor, brings a whole depth of flavor out of the pepper that you wouldn't otherwise get. What is something that's really useful about it, as anyone who's like grown peppers as a gardener might know, is that you have peppers there's a window in which you get them, and they're great, and you get a lot of them, probably more than you can eat reasonably. And then they're gone for the year. They don't last super long in your fridge on the shelf. So fermentation and turning it into hot sauce is a really great way to extend the usefulness of that crop outside of just the short window in the summer and late fall where they're available to you.
Cool. Yeah, that's anything fermented, I feel like uses stuff up that you otherwise couldn't use. So it's definitely a good skill to have. So what exactly are we making today? Is it like exactly what you think of when you say hot sauce, or is this like Frank's Red Hot, or like is that the same thing?
Yeah, to a degree. I mean, Frank's Red Hot is one of my favorite store brand ones. But ever since I got into ferment myself, really nothing can compare to that flavor. We're going to do a couple of things today. We're going to talk about like preparing the peppers for the sauce. We're going to talk about getting them into the jar with the right ratios to make sure that they ferment in a safe and clean way, so that the lactobacillus is the best chance of taking over there. And then I started another batch of hot sauce that we're going to blend up. So we're going to actually finish the product as well. So you're going to see hot sauce at all stages here today.
Awesome. So now you're going to have like way too much hot sauce. So if you need to get rid of some, I'll give you my address.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to send that on. I think, yeah. There's definitely plenty to go around by the end of today, I'm sure.
Yeah. So, so this is basically the same concept as kimchi, which you did about a month ago, right?
Yeah, it is basically the same concept. One of the easiest ways to introduce yourself in fermentation, because it does seem pretty intimidating when you first get started, is lactobacillus fermentation. Is the simplest. It's also the most common way to ferment just about anything. So there are other cultures do some things differently. I know in India there's a way that you can actually ferment in oil, which is interesting. You can ferment garlic in honey, because the honey is a preservative. Those are all great things. I'm a big fan, but other than that, lactobacillus is I think the easiest way to get started. It requires the least amount of like access for inputs, I think.
Yeah, and for folks that are familiar with our podcast, we talk about lactobacillus quite a bit in one of the episodes on taking care of our plants. So it's the same thing, just doing with food instead.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's super common, just like yeast of the air. Lactobacillus is like generally the first um, bacteria that's going to form during fermentation, and you just want to create an environment in which it outcompetes any other things that might be harmful to humans. But for people, it's really good for gut health, and it adds a huge depth of flavor and brings out a lot of complexity, like I said earlier.
Awesome. So let's get going, I guess.
Yeah. So, I think the first and most important thing, and I could say this a thousand times or not at all, but the most important thing is to glove up when you're making hot sauce. I can't tell you how many times just a minor touch with some of these peppers has resulted in, great pain when either taking out my contacts later or using the restroom before washing hands. So just glove up. I highly recommend it. Get yourself a box of gloves. They're going to last you for a long time if you're not doing this professionally. So maybe stock up on a couple of boxes, but that'll last you a couple of seasons. So just something to think about.
Cool.
One other thing that you want to think about is to think about the peppers that you're going to use if you use yourself. Think about like the soil that they're in and like the acidity, because that's going to affect the amount of heat that you use. Today we're going to make two different types of pepper hot sauce, or ferment two different peppers, and then I've got a third one that I'm going to blend up there at the end. But what you're looking for is I like to keep my peppers separate in terms of which is which. So some of my favorites, I really like the red peppers especially. This is a Fresno chili, just a basic Fresno chili, grows in most climates. Habanero peppers, obviously going to be a little bit higher on the Scoville scale, which is like the rating for like how hot it's going to be. And these particular habaneros will mess you up. So what I like to do in order to make sure
Nice.
what I like to do in order to make sure that I have control of the heat of the hot sauce at the end of it is I like to make hot sauce in 2 or sometimes 3 different heat level peppers together that I will have the similar heat rating. And the reason why is because then at the end, when it's all blended together, I can sort of mix those together to create the desired heat level that I want. So I basically make 3 separate hot sauces and then put them together in ratios that I like.
Cool. So I know you mentioned like the soil can impact how hot a pepper can be, but like generally speaking, if you are making hot sauce, is it the pepper is the rating that it's going to be and it's all equal, or like I've heard that seeds can carry a lot of the what's it called, the capsin, whatever it is,
Capsaicin, yeah.
capsaicin.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So there's a lot of different things that go into like how hot, I guess, the final product of a hot sauce is, but also how hot a pepper is. So in comparing, like the weakest habanero is always going to be hotter than the hottest Fresno, probably. I mean, they do breed non-hot habaneros, which have this nice sweet flavor. But let's not get into that because we're really talking about like growing our own stuff or getting it from a local purveyor. But in addition to that, if I have 2 habanero plants grown in different conditions, different sunlight, most importantly, different soil acidity, they're going to produce pretty extreme, relatively extreme differences in how hot they are. So yeah, definitely like the type of pepper is something to consider when you're in the planting season, and the conditions of where you plant it is also probably pretty important. And then you mentioned earlier the other thing, which is just what I was about to talk about, is that a lot of the capsaicin in peppers is grown it comes from the ribs and the seeds of the pepper itself. So I'm just going to cut this Fresno open. You can see just how seedy and that particular Fresno is. One of the ways that I like to control the heat to cut out a lot of these seeds. A little bit of seeds in my hot sauce is good. A lot, and you start to run the risk of like even what you thought was going to be a medium or a mild hot sauce being a little bit too hot. I'm just going to clean out. Another thing that you want to clean out, in addition to the seeds themselves, the ribs of the pepper. This is the part where the seed is attached to the wall of the pepper. I don't know how well any of you can see that based on the distance to the camera, but the
Yeah, it's
ribs,
the white part, right?
yeah, the white part is maybe less hot, but actually adds a lot of bitterness. So cleaning the pepper out, you can get a much sweeter flavor, not hotter, but like not less hot, but a sweeter flavor because the bitterness comes from those ribs. So I like to clean those out. Another thing to think about when making hot sauce is to, when you're doing your knife work and getting everything ready and prepared, you want to work your way from least to hottest, because if I clean these habaneros first and then I start cleaning a bunch of Fresno peppers, the juices, the acid, all of that from the habaneros are going to get into the Fresnos, and that's going to affect, what I thought was going to be a medium or mild sauce is going to end up being quite hot. So you notice I clean the Fresnos first and working my way to the habaneros. With these.
Now, I want to ask, how important is the ripeness to the flavor profile? And can you work with something that's maybe a little overripe because of the fermentation process?
Actually, yeah, that's a really great point. I almost exclusively, when it's a choice, I guess, when I'm not doing it for a demo, we'll use slightly over ripened peppers, peppers that I've let go a little bit longer. Those are going to be your best bet for hot sauce, and the reason why is because I think they release a little bit more flavor, but more importantly, like you don't really want to use them in cooking, so it's a really great way to use something that might have ended up in the compost pile or in the chicken feed, which is also quite useful. That's another thing I learned recently that, and maybe you can comment on this too, Andy, that a lot of birds don't really have receptors for heat, and that peppers are the basis of a lot of birds' diet because of that.
I did not know that, but I guess that makes sense because I believe peppers are native to like India, right?
Many of
like
them,
Southeast
yeah.
Asia. Yeah. So that would make a lot of sense because chickens, at least like the modern chicken, stems from Southeast Asia. So that could be something that makes a lot of sense.
There's a guy, a famous chef, Dan Barber. He's an asshole, but I will say he owns a farm that's attached to his restaurant. He bred some peppers to get them hotter, and he ended up with a product that was just like utterly inedible. However, he did feed them to the chickens on the farm almost exclusively because they didn't care and loved them, in fact. And so they ate so many of these red hot peppers. They ended up with laying eggs that are just super red, which he then uses in his restaurant as like a pepper egg. You can impart a little bit of the flavor of the pepper through the chicken, which is just a weird concept to me. But
not only is that super weird, but it also raises an interesting question. Like, spicy foods aren't just spicy for your mouth, but like your entire body. Like, it can do some damage to your stomach. So, like, how does that work for chickens? I guess it works fine.
That's a good. Yeah, apparently. I mean, I'm not the expert on chickens, but Dan Barber seems to be liking it so far. So, yeah, it seemed really interesting. Anyway, peppers are clean. Peeled some garlic here just ahead of time. I've got a couple of different spices from my pantry. I'm going to do a quick thing, which is remove my gloves so that I could touch these things without regretting it later the next time. So I just have some juniper berries here, some whole grain black pepper, some allspice. In terms of like the stuff that you want to add to your peppers, and I say this about hot sauce and pickles, is if the spice rolls, it's going to be good for in your general rule of thumb in your pickle or your hot sauce. So just something to think about.
So you mean like physically rolls?
Physically rolls, yeah. Physically rolls. Those round spices, yeah, they're definitely the way to go.
I don't know if I've ever seen a juniper berry container that big.
Oh yeah, well, when you do this professionally, I think you have to buy in bulk.
Yeah,
But
I mean, it makes
yeah,
sense. It's just a large thing of
they're
juniper berries.
they're also hard to find. But I will say that if you live near a city, every city has one of certain size, of a certain medium low size, probably has a restaurant supply store on some level, and that's a really great place to get things like spices. It's not really a great place to find. I mean, that's where you're going to find some really cheap chicken, or some really cheap beef or anything like that, which like fine, that's great. But like the spices, like there's nothing really wrong with those spices. So go for it. I have here. Oh, did you have a question? Sorry.
I was just thinking about it. Like I can't recall tasting juniper in hot sauce before.
Yeah, it's going to be subtle because we're not going to use a lot of it, but that is something that's a trick that I guess I don't know that I've ever encountered someone else who does juniper too in their hot sauce, but I recommend it. I definitely don't back away from it. I also really love it when I'm like smoking juniper with like smoking meats, especially pork, is really good. Doesn't get used very often, but you take the jus and you can cook down the juniper berries in it. That imparts a lot of flavor too. But in pickling a lot of things, juniper is a nice touch for stuff. Yeah. Okay, so I have here a clean. I washed this earlier with soap and water, which is really just fine. Hot water and soap. This is just a ball jar. I'm going to put in as many of the Fresno peppers as I think is reasonable to fit, which is probably all of them. I think they'll all fit, which is fine. Every once in a while, I'm going to intersperse some garlic. Probably 5 cloves in total or so. And I'm putting these in whole, you'll notice, because like ultimately this is going to get blended up. So who cares? Okay, get rid of this. So in addition to the peppers, I've got here, it's about 3.5 liters of water, which means it's 3,500 grams if you want to do things by weight, which I usually prefer to do. And the target for lactobacillus is anywhere between 3 and 5% salt bounds of weight. So what I've done there is I've got like 3,500. My target's 5-ish of salt. So that's like 175 grams. Or another way you could do it is this is just shy of a gallon of water, like just shy of a gallon. Maybe a couple of cups shy of a gallon, but and about half a cup of salt. Because not everyone has a scale handy. I highly recommend you get one if you don't have one for precision. But if you get, it's going to be okay. That's why there's that window of 3 to 5% salt by weight. I'm going to do the same thing with the habaneros. Add a couple of garlic in there. Whew. They're breathing. They're breathing at me. Can you feel my eyes water just a little bit?
Nice.
Yeah, it's gonna be good.
Gotta make it
Okay,
worth
so yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's get rid of this. I've got my 2 peppers. I'm gonna do the rest of this by pretty much eyeball because the important measurement, the really only important measurement you need out of this is the salt content of the water. But this is the black pepper, and I'm looking for about a tablespoon, which means about a hand, little palm full. And I'm going to do pretty much the same balance with all the spices. This is allspice, also very good. Not very commonly used, but maybe a little less. and the pepper. Oops. And juniper. And juniper is going to impart a lot of floralness to, and you don't really have to be too shy with it. Maybe a little bit more than black pepper, even. It's going to impart a lot of sort of floral notes to the hot sauce as it ferments. Out of the way. Okay. We're going to take this water and hopefully I have enough. I'm going to fill it right up to pretty much. Let's see how close we can get it with both. That's good. Right there. And because I measured the amount of water separate, this is just good in terms of the balance. I don't need to be concerned that I didn't use enough because this is just a good brine in terms of the ratio of salt to water. So however much fits is however much fits.
That simplifies things quite a bit.
Yeah, definitely making your brine ahead of time because you don't want to be like, oh, well, my jar is this big. How much volume does the pepper take? That's just math you don't need to be doing. So just shy of a gallon, about half a cup of salt. That's your target window. Or if you want to get real particular about it, I highly recommend you weigh your water. I also recommend you use distilled water or filtered water because the stuff from your tap has usually been treated, especially if you live in a city. And that's actually going to interfere with the growth of the lactobacillus. So it's going to make it a lot harder it's going to make the bacteria work harder. And in turn, that might make the wrong bacteria come out on top. There is one other trick that I'm going to do after the show happens, which is that when I pull the hot sauce that I'm going to blend up, I'm actually going to save some of that liquid and just do a quick toss in here. And that's going to kickstart the fermentation. You do this with hot sauce. You can do this with kimchi, the liquid from kimchi you can use to start the next batch. Usually you can use that liquid for at least one whole season, just continuously up and re-up it. And that's going to make your ferment go faster and be healthier from the start so that there's less for it to compete against because that's a shot of just straight lactobacillus in there. So anyway, I'm going to do a little bit of more touching of peppers here probably for a second. But any questions so far while I get this back on?
Been pretty quiet. Someone did ask about cross-pollination. I forgot to ask you about it. But I'm imagining that does probably affect the heat of the peppers.
I have heard that is the case. Probably, I imagine that's the case. The honest truth here is that I am not, an expert gardener by any means. I'm much more of a you give me the vegetable and I'll make it work kind of person. But I am under the impression that cross-pollination, cross-breeding of peppers is something that can definitely affect your heat. So be conscious, I suppose, of where you put them in your garden. But they really eat up the sun, right? So depending on your gardening situation, you might not have too much of a choice about where things go. So you see here, I have a bunch of weird little equipment. These are called pickle helixes. What they're used for is that you put them in the jar, and this is a little bit more heavy. They push they completely submerge the product under the liquid, which is because lactobacillus grows without air, more ideally. But you actually don't need all this fancy equipment that I use. So I'm going to do one jar with the fancy equipment. I'm going to go with the habaneros, I suppose, just because it's the first one. I'm taking a canning lid that doesn't fit. These are wide mouth jars, respectively. I'm taking a normal mouth canning lid right there. I'm going to put a pickle helix in, and judging by the amount here, I'm probably going to put 2 pickle helixes in.
So we did get a question. You can keep doing what you're doing, and I'll ask it for you. Someone wanted to know about substitutes for juniper seeds with maybe fruit, like a mango, or if there's any other general substitute that you would think of that people are commonly using.
Yeah, actually, so fermenting fruit with your hot sauce is pretty common. I don't have any fruit here at the moment. oranges are really good. You can actually also ferment them with orange peels, especially if you like peel them with a peeler on the outside, so you don't get any of that bitterness from the pith. But yeah, fermented fruit and peppers is a really great way to add a lot of really interesting in-depth flavors to your hot sauce. One of the things that go ahead, please.
I was gonna ask, so I've brewed beer with orange peel before, and it gives a little bit of a blueberry-ish flavor. If you
Yeah.
so is it the same profile that you get in the fermented product, since it technically is like the same process?
Pretty much. I think the differences in yeast are going to affect that too. Definitely. But that orange to kind of blueberry-esque, blackberry-esque movement is something that happens in fermentation. Things that you expect to taste a certain way because you eat them raw, like oranges, definitely come out deeper, more interesting, different in general once they've been fermented. So that's a really good example of.
Oh, did we lose the Comrade Chef?
That.
There
Can you
you
hear
are.
me?
Yep, we
Were
heard
you?
you. We lost you for like 5 seconds.
All right. Sorry about that.
You
Yeah.
came out the other side. That's all that matters.
That's what matters, definitely. One of the things about this particular jar that I just want to point out is it's got a rubber seal right here. And that's going to, when I put in these, this is sort of a double bubbler chamber. And as they ferment, they're going to release gases. And you want those gases to force the oxygen out of the jar itself. But it still needs somewhere to go, otherwise it will explode. So what this does is it allows the oxygen to exit the chamber, bubble out and up again, without allowing oxygen to come back through. So you just take a little bit of that leftover water that we had earlier. I'm just going to pour that right in there.
So
now
is
you'll
there any
see.
fruit in particular that you like to use for to go back to what you were talking about?
Yeah, fermenting pineapple is pineapple. Anything is kind of my favorite. It's actually the one thing that I'm allergic to in this earth, and I still eat. I'll eat a whole pineapple and just deal with the tongue swelling that comes from it. But fermenting pineapple is really great. The other thing that's really fun, what I was going to get into a little bit later is that we make our own vinegar, my partner and I. And so we're actually going to use this cranberry vinegar to finish off the hot sauce that I'm going to blend up a little bit later. And that's
awesome.
also going to impart a lot of flavor. And that's super simple. So if we ever want to do a Twitch stream on that, I mean, that's practically a joke in terms of how easy it is. It's really just about patience more than anything.
I've got some apple vinegar and what's the other one going right now? Pumpkin vinegar right now.
Oh,
like
nice.
About 20 feet away from me, waiting for it to finish processing.
Very cool. Very cool. Have you gotten to did you drink any of the liquor that happens before it gets to the vinegar stage? Or?
So this is actually a byproduct of making a fermented fruit juice for my plants. So it wasn't even making like a liqueur. It was, I mean, I guess technically there's probably a decent amount of alcohol in it, but I did not try it. Although I guess you probably, like I said, you probably could.
You probably could. It'll mess your gut up. But it's tasty.
Like many things. It tastes good. You regret it after.
Yeah, definitely that. I'm going to do the same thing with this, except I'm going to do a little bit differently. If you don't want to buy pickle helixes, because like we're really talking about fewer inputs, right? One of the things that's actually a nice trick. I've got a baggie full of water, and I've tried to remove as much of the air from it as possible. I'm just going to set that in there, and I think it might be too big. Yeah, I got too many peppers in here to do it this way, unfortunately. So we'll have to save that for another time. But you can actually just take a small baggie full of water or full of clean river rocks. As long as the baggie has been sanitized on the outside, you can just use that as a weight to push everything down below the thing. It actually sometimes does a better job because it conforms to the edges of the jar itself as it presses down. So we're gonna have to go with a pickle helix this time. It looks like, just because I overstuffed this jar a bit.
Gonna have too much hot sauce.
Yeah, there's no such thing. Someone will eat it.
Yeah. So how long does this stuff last?
That's a really great question. So that's kind of the beauty of it is once it's been fermented, once it's been blended up, if you're keeping it refrigerated, it'll last a year. If you're keeping it in like a basement storage sort of temperature, if you have a cold cellar, it'll also last 6 to 9 months sometimes. And what's also really great about it is that the older it is, it's continuing to age. It's a live hot sauce at the end of this. So the flavor is actually just getting better, more complex. And that's what's really great about it, is that you've got all these peppers at a very particular time of the year. And then you want to, use some of that when you get to winter, the dead of winter, like it is now. Obviously, these were not grown locally. I grabbed these from the store. But when you get to the dead of winter and you're down to potatoes and, just a few other vegetables that you could, if you eat one more of, you're just going to be sad about it. Adding a little bit of hot sauce definitely reminds you of that punch of flavor of summer and spring. So it's a really, I recommend it specifically because you can save the use of those hot peppers through the rest of the year. By the time the hot sauce goes bad, you'll have more peppers again. So
yeah, exactly. It lasts just long enough that by the time the next cycle is ready, you're ready to make some fresh hot sauce.
I'm sure that's not by accident. someone figured that out a long time ago and made that work. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set these in my I've got it's a closet, my fermentation chamber. That's just a coat closet with nothing but food stuffs in it. Same place where we did the kimchi. You want to keep it at a temperature. Room temperature is anywhere between 65 to about 76, 70, as hot as you want it to be while it's fermenting, because otherwise it gets too active too quickly. If it's anything more than that, you can always bring it to a lower temperature, like your basement, and let it hang out there for a while, because that's not going to do it any harm. It's just going to take longer for it to ferment. So I'm going to set these in there for the moment, but remember, I'm going to save some of that liquid from the next one that I'm going to bring over here in a second, and we're going to add it to these in just a few minutes. So this is what another jar of hot sauce or another set of hot peppers that I fermented is going to look like here in the end. And I'm going to bring this up really close to the screen so that you can really see what's going on, because this is a really good example of good, well-fermented hot sauce. First of all, you're going to notice there's some bubbles going on in there. That's a sign of active fermentation. And you've also noticed that the liquid has gotten a lot more cloudy. These particular peppers are cherry bombs, which are probably the mildest of the peppers that I use to make hot sauce. And another thing that you want to notice, if you get in really close there, you start to see this sort of white film develop around the peppers. And a lot of people, when they're fermenting things for the first time, that makes them really nervous. They think that it's like a mold. It's actually just calm yeast, which is part of the pepper, part of the outside of most vegetables anyway. And that's not going to be a big deal. It's not going to affect your ferment in any way. If anything, it's going to make it better. I'm finally seeing the chat.
Oh yeah, same question.
Yeah. I had some mild ghost peppers from it. I think that's really fun. I've never had a mild ghost pepper. I know that they exist because that someone's thought to do that. But for those who don't know, ghost peppers are probably the highest rated Scoville rating in the world. Hot as hell.
Yeah, I don't eat those peppers. I have limits.
I don't think they're meant for mammals, is what someone put in someone commented at me, I think in a private message. Peppers don't want to be eaten by mammals.
Yeah, and this one, unlike the kimchi, we are not going to be having typed out notes, right? But fortunately, it's a pretty straightforward one, I think, comparatively.
Oh yeah, you mean in terms of the recipe?
Yeah,
Yeah. This is much more. Hot sauce is more of a feeling, and it's going to take some experimentation than I think a direct recipe really requires. Something I'm happy to write down some ratios of to make 6%, and send that on the way. But I don't know how helpful a direct recipe will be because really it's about. I think hot sauce is a very personal choice and like how hot you want things, what flavors you like to add. So it's much more fly by the seat of your pants, sort of.
yeah. I'm gonna be
So,
trying to make a fig hot sauce.
oh, that sounds great. Do we
Yeah,
have fig vinegar? No. I've got dates, mango, cherry, but yeah, I don't have any
yeah.
fig. That's a really good idea.
I could eat fig everything, so I would definitely make a fig hot sauce.
So just to let you know what I'm smelling, and it's hard. It's not really the medium but the smell of the peppers themselves, it smells like they've been cooked almost. You know that smell of like the sweet pepper as you're sautéing it. You get a lot of that right off the nose when you open it for the first time. Also, it's you can definitely see from above a lot better the sort of bubbles that's going. I let this hot sauce go a little bit longer than I usually do. Usually, I like to cut it off at about 14 days. This has been going for I think we're at 18 days. Yeah, 18 days. Um, and the reason why is because it was doing so well. It was like, it was so alive when I checked it just a couple of days ago. And I knew that we had this coming up and I wanted to show you the last bit of the process to this. So I'm going to go ahead and just dump that out. And you'll notice I'm dumping into a bowl and a strainer because it's really important that I save some of that liquid for the rest of this process. Um, I'm bringing over a high-speed blender, so this noise is probably going to be unpleasant for
I can turn
everyone
down your
listening.
mic.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea. I'll let you know when in a few moments. So I'm just going to take the peppers. These, like I said, these are cherry bombs. They're pretty mild. Throw in all these peppers. And because some of the seasonings, allspice, the juniper berries that I put into this, and because the hot sauce was set up in a brine, in a salt brine, you really don't generally need to add much salt. Obviously, that's a preference thing. I usually do not add salt, as I am. But you're going to put a little bit of the brine. That's plenty. And we'll adjust these as we go too. I'm also going to have to probably deglove to take this. The pressure is building on this vinegar. So nice. It's kind of almost at the kombucha stage, this vinegar. Maybe a little bit, maybe still a little kombucha-y more than vinegar.
Nice.
Mm. That's about it. So a little bit of vinegar. I might add some white vinegar as we go too, because I don't want to get it too fruity. But go ahead and turn down my mic because this is going to be. Okay. Let me know
You
if
good?
you can hear me. Okay, so one thing that I'm going to do really quick here, I left it over on the stove because it needed to cool, but I'll be right back and talk at you while I'm walking. Earlier in the evening, I did a thing where I took some 50/50 olive canola oil because that raises the smoke point just a little bit. And in that, I brought to a very pretty low temp, medium low temp in this. And I fried some garlic chips, which is a
Ooh,
really, yeah, they're like my favorite easy salad topping. But now what I've got, in addition to the garlic chips, which is just really just a nice byproduct, is this really nice sort of fried garlic oil, which is going to impart a lot of flavor too. That's so we've got a couple of different liquids working here. In addition to the liquids of the pepper itself, we also have that vinegar that I introduced, the water. And now what I want to do is emulsify a little bit of that garlic oil into the hot sauce. And that's what's going to make it particulate, like really smooth, and also import a lot of that garlic flavor as well. So you're going to need to tone me down a little
gotcha.
bit, I think, again here in a second. Appreciate it. Said earlier, these are cherry bomb peppers. They're significantly milder than any of the other two peppers that I use. So this is probably going to be a pretty mild sauce, but I might use it to use some of those other ones to heat up. That's fucking great. That's really good.
So, how much of that oil did you end up adding?
Yeah, so that was probably in total a little bit less than a cup of oil, I think, that I added. And you'll notice I waited until the liquid itself of the hot sauce was up to speed, and then I slowly introduced oil. That's the way that you're going to get those oil, that fat to bind with the water, which are naturally are separated. So you want to create an emulsion. You want to emulsify that together by slowly introducing the oil and allowing the blades to whip the air, because that's what's going to the air in the liquid. That's what's going to bind the oil to the rest of the liquid. So probably a little bit less than a cup. And now what I have is a whole bunch of garlic oil that I get to use in my cooking for the rest of the time. Not to mention all of the garlic chips. I don't know. We'll toss it like that with a salad or something later in the week. Probably. So,
Yeah, can't go wrong.
yeah. So that's about it. I mean, that's as easy as it is. I just, the water to salt ratio is probably the most important. I've got these other two peppers that are going to be on the ferment. I've got a ton of liquid left over here. I'm just going to probably take a shot glass, dip it, and pour it right into the top, and that's it. Take the peppers,
So,
a little bit of vinegar, a little bit of oil, and you're good.
so I got a question for you. Now, when you store that fermented hot sauce, are you gonna still need to let it bubble off, or can you like put it in a jar just like any other hot sauce?
That's actually a really interesting question. So most of the hot sauces that you buy in the store were, even if they were fermented, are now dead. They've killed it, they've packaged it, they've canned it, whatever their process is after fermentation. They've probably killed it so that it's quote unquote shelf stable, according to the FDA, and it can be sold on the shelf. This hot sauce is very much alive. So there's a couple of different things that you can do. You can absolutely repeat the same process that they do, which is to can it. What you want to do is just fill up a regular canning jar, and then boil it and let the lid seal down. But what I much prefer to do is to keep it relatively chill, and it's got a much higher temperature of like tolerability than like say a gallon of milk does. But the reason why you want to keep it refrigerated specifically is because it's still alive. It's still got that lactobacillus in there. It's still fermenting. So you don't want it to over ferment to the point where I don't know, the flavor just becomes really musky, is I guess the best way to put it. And furthermore, yes, to answer your question, if it's in a sealed jar, every once in a while, not every once in a while, and more often the warmer it is, you're going to want to burp it because otherwise it will explode. Yeah.
It's my favorite part of having fermented things is maybe it'll explode today.
It might. Yeah, you don't know. You don't know. That's the beauty of these bubblers that I've been using is that they allow the air to escape without disaster striking, I suppose.
Yeah,
I do have a. Oh, go ahead, please. I'm listening.
I was gonna say it just reminds me of like making beer. Like it's something I've been doing for such a long time, just never with food, even though it's basically the same concept.
I bought a case of these from a glass distributor, I think here in Pennsylvania, a while ago, and I haven't gone through all of them yet. But nice little hot sauce bottles. They come with the topper, and depending on you can just fill these up bit by bit. But I'm probably not going to use this in this just yet because I think I want to add more heat to this before it's what I want out of a hot sauce. But in general, this is great. This is ready to eat. If anyone's like, oh, I like the flavor of hot sauce, but like everything is too hot off the store. This cherry bomb has a lot of flavor and very mild in terms of heat.
Cool. So somebody commented that they have tried bag fermenting, which is like I guess a vac seal or a food sealer. Have you tried that? I'm just curious about your thoughts.
So I don't have a vacuum sealer here at home. We did a little bit of vacuum sealing when I was at one particular restaurant, and that's an interesting way to make sauerkraut too. That's a really good way to do that. I've never tried it with peppers. I'm sure it could be done. It's the same process, right? So we're talking about the same bacteria, and the reason why that works and why that would be so effective is because lactobacillus doesn't require much oxygen to start in the fermentation process, but like other things, other bacteria, molds, things like that generally do. So vacuum sealing is a really great way to do that. If you have a vacuum sealer, you absolutely could vacuum seal those peppers in that water brine solution, achieve almost the same thing. I guess the one thing you want to be cautious about is that periodically you're probably going to have to open it up and transfer it again. Otherwise, the bag is going to puff up and explode with carbon dioxide. It might eventually pop. So just something to be aware of.
Cool. Yeah, so is there anything else people should know about this process that you didn't cover? I know you said that you were letting that one go 18 days. So when's the cutoff for like when you're like, okay, this is done?
Yeah, so it's a matter of preference, and I encourage experimentation. For the first couple of batches of hot sauce, try one out for 6 days and see how you like that flavor, and then gradually build your way up to like 14 to 16 is kind of where I think the absolute sweet spot is in terms of flavor development. After that, you start to get a little bit more muskiness by like day 20, 25. That's going to be a little bit overaged for my tastes, and you're going to start to get into the realm of like this pepper tastes somehow of blue cheese-ness to it, which like not a bad thing, and some people really like. The cutoff though is eventually the real cutoff is eventually the lactobacillus runs out of things to eat. It'll end. A lot of it'll die. Some other bacteria could get in there and molds, usually the first thing that you see is a mold starts, is the sign that like you maybe went a little bit too far. Now, if a mold gets started, you're going to see that start to develop on the surface first. And if you're in the day 20 range, that's actually okay as long as the mold, because the mold will gradually start to penetrate below the surface of the liquid. And as long as like, it hasn't gotten to those peppers underneath, you can just scoop that top layer of pepper off and throw it away. There's nothing wrong with that. Would I serve it in a restaurant? No, I wouldn't serve it for money. But would I eat it? Absolutely. Like that wouldn't be, a problem for me at all.
Cool. Does anyone have any other questions, I guess, before we wrap this up?
One last thing. If you're really interested in fermentation and a really great place to get started in a book that has pretty much every question you could conceivably ask, and I haven't even asked all of the questions of it yet. This book, The Art of Fermentation, is really, really fantastic. I highly recommend it by, who is this? Sandor Elix Katz. This book is incredible. It has so many details in there about what to look for, what could go wrong. And it's told in very specific, or I guess really general terms of like, you should look for this can happen. Here's an idea of like how to set your kitchen up. It goes into excruciating detail about the process. So highly recommend if you're interested in doing some projects more complicated than hot sauce. This is a really great place to start.
Awesome. So before we wrap up, could you just tell us a little bit about the Rice PGH?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So Rice Pittsburgh is a small mutual aid organization right here in Pittsburgh. We go out, we give direct aid. We believe in giving direct aid to people, whether that's through clothes, donations. We also scavenge for food. We get donations for food. And we turn those into meals every week. So if anything that you could send our way, I promise will get used to in the most effective way possible. We really believe as a group in and also going to communities and listening to what it is that they say that they want and trying to deliver that to them with the best of our abilities. So if you wanted to send something through Venmo, send it to Rice PGH. They're good people. I do some work with them. My partner does a fair amount of work with them. So yeah, hit us up.
Awesome. Comrade, thanks so much. This has been fantastic. I have a couple words for these folks and we can chat after.
All right, absolutely. I'll see you.
Awesome. So folks, hopefully you guys enjoyed that. That was super fun. I learned a bunch about hot sauce that I did not know. If you guys are new to the Poor Proles Almanac, please go check out our podcast. We drop episodes every Sunday night. We have a new episode out right now on the Spanish Dehesa, the traditional history of the Iberian landscape. Really interesting. Go listen. It's kind of fun. Also, if you enjoyed this, we're going to be back on Thursday talking with Dr. Aisha Khan. We'll be talking about bringing praxis into everyday life. So if this stuff is interesting to you, please tune in for Thursday night. I think it's 8 o'clock or 8:30, something like that. We'll post about it. Also hit us up on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and wherever else you do social media stuff. Subscribe to us on YouTube if you're watching over there. If you are on Twitch, please do subscribe. And also, if you want to support this project, you can do that by either subbing here, and I guess that's different than following. You can subscribe and it throws us a couple bucks, or you can hop on Patreon, patreon.com/poorprolesalmanac, where we drop our episodes usually a week early. And if we are not just dropping episodes, we're also telling people what the next month or two looks like for our schedule in terms of episodes we're releasing. There's a limited series that we've done in the past that's up on our Patreon as well. If you just haven't been able to get enough of our content, go check it out. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Been a lot of fun. I'll see you guys on Thursday. And yeah, keep making hot sauce, I guess. All right, guys. See ya.